Let's get back to the Gemara. We had an argument that between Rav and Ravasi, if a father says, I married off my daughter and she commits adultery, is she liable for the death penalty? Right? So Rav says yes, Ravasi says no. We rule like Ravasi that she's not liable for the death penalty. He's believed to say she's married, to prohibit her to someone else, but in terms of if she should commit adultery, unless you had two witnesses that she was married, there's no liability of death penalty, meaning when she becomes an adult. Over a person, let's say, cohabits with her. He says, I married off my daughter, now somebody else cohabits with her. So it's adultery. So that act of adultery would have the liability of death penalty. The answer is no. Ravasi says, Rav says no, Ravasi says yes. We rule like Rav that there's no death penalty. Yeah. So we're holding over here. It doesn't have the same strength of the marriage. It's not. If this is a bona fide marriage, how could there not be a death penalty?
That's my question. One of them leads to punishment to the marriage, and one of them doesn't.
That's what it is. Which means he's not believed to that degree. It'll be the equivalent of like Shav Nashchatei Chidusura. You have 1,000 witnesses saying that that meat is kosher, and the person says the meat is not kosher. The person says regarding yourself, you believe the person. Regarding anyone else, it's kosher meat. Are you going to give them in Malkus? You're not going to give them in Malkus. It's the same idea. That's the way we rule. We will not allow him to eat it, but in terms of giving him Malkus for eating the velo, it has to be universally recognized that it's something which is not kosher, which is not. Correct? There wouldn't be a liability.
There's no liability on the mother or the father.
In term, or if somebody would marry,
For incest.
right,
Although the children are...
they would not be permitted.
They're not arguing. They're not
Right.
arguing. They're of Vadai
They're definitely mamzerim.
Mamzer. It's not even
Correct.
shy.
So that's
So that's an unusual...
Rav Chisda Omar. Echad zeh v'echad zeh ein sokvin. Rav Chisda argues. Right, Ravasi differentiated. If a father says, my daughter, I married off my daughter, he's believed even that there should be a liability of skila. But if a woman says, niskadashti, I married myself off, that's shav nafshech. There are no witnesses to prove it. She's off limits to others, but let's say she commits adultery. Everybody agrees. She's not liable for the death penalty, correct? Woman says, I'm a married woman. Is she put to death? No. She's not permitted to be with anyone else. The Beis Din would not allow it. But it's Shav Nashchetei Chidusura. She's establishing herself as a married woman. Okay? But Rav Chisda says, no witnesses. It's purely her own admission. What? We have to locate the husband. No, she's not believed to say she lied. She's not believed. Well, that's the Gemara. That's the Gemara. The Gemara says in Ksubis that, let's say a woman says to her husband, a woman, she's in need, she's not permitted to husband, and a man comes home, his wife says, I'm off limits to you, I'm in need. Okay? So she makes that statement. David is important. She makes that statement. The husband is not permitted. Then after she says to the husband, I was only joking. I wasn't really serious. Is she believed? She's not believed. No. If she said she made a mistake, and she shows how she made the mistake, right? Let's say she says, I saw something, and the husband looks at it, he says, it's nothing. Then, of course, she's not. She says, I wasn't feeling well, and I wasn't up to it, and that's the only reason why I said it. So if it's something which is plausible, and it could be believed, you believe her. Because she's explaining to you why she said she's in need. So therefore, the original statement was not Shav Nafshech Surah. She didn't mean to establish as it's forbidden. It was only to keep the husband away from her, because she just wasn't up to it. So as long as it's something which is plausible, it undoes the original statement. But let's say it's not. She comes up with some kind of far-fetched story, right? We don't believe her. Saying you're in nida, she's off limits to the husband until she waits the period of time that should be permitted to the husband. Okay? So the halacha is, but the Gemara says, let's say she did an action. It's more than just she said she was in nida. In the olden days, a woman was a nida. She wore certain types of clothing that indicated she was a nida. So then words cannot undo the action. If it went to that degree, she's not permitted. Okay? She's not permitted. She's not permitted with all the excuses in the world. It's referred to as an amaslo. If she gives an amaslo, that's a plausible excuse, then halacha is you believe her. But if she's lovship big day nidusa, she wore clothing that the nida normally wears, then regardless of what it is. So there's a famous Shach, and you're there, cites a tshuva responsible from the Truma Sadeshin. Very interesting tshuva. There was a woman that whenever she'd become pregnant, she always, the neighbors, she would always have an ayin haring and would cause her to miscarry. So the question is, so how is she going to protect herself? She's going to always wear clothing of a nida, and as a result of this, they'll never know she's pregnant, because she's pregnant, why is she wearing it? So this will protect her from ayin haring. So the difficulty is, but if that's the case, how's the husband permitted her? That's a statement. That's a statement. So if Bezdin knows that she's wearing big day nidus, the clothing that a menstruant normally wears, and let's say he engages with his wife, Bezdin's going to give him malchus. Then they're not going to permit it. So how could you work this out? How could you reconcile the two? Because the moment it becomes public knowledge, then she's susceptible to the ayin haring once word gets out. And she was advised to wear, so you mean from the time she conceives till she gives birth, she's not going to be permitted to husband? So the Shach says, if actually Bezdin knows that they're engaged with one another, they're going to stop it. But is he in violation if he engaged? He knows the truth. He's not doing anything wrong. He knows she's not a nida. But in terms of how do they have to conduct themselves? They don't believe him, right? Because factually, based on what of the action, an action was taken to establish that all the excuses in the world, it cannot be believed. Cannot be believed. So as a result of that, he's permitted to his wife, but factually, the Bezdin, if they become aware of it, they have a right to give him malchus, and of course, all the excuses are not going to help, regardless how plausible it is, because once the action is taken, you're bound to the action. No, so then, once she gives birth, so then it's clear.
6 months later, and they track back 6 months, was wearing the nida.
No, let's say she gave birth 9 months later, right? Same idea. But now no, of course not. It's like the Bezdin goes and accepts witnesses that Reuven killed Shimon. Reuven killed Shimon. And also Shimon shows up. Sorry, if so-called the victim shows up in court, it's clear. Well, we have all the evidence that he's guilty. It's around what kind of evidence you have. The man is here. It's the same thing. Once she gives birth, and retroactively, the whole idea is because words cannot undo an action, a behavior pattern. But if the child's born that clearly says that she's not a nida, it's clear. But until that point, we don't know. We don't know exactly. We have to deal with the fact. The fact is, no, because again, it's the presumed status. We don't have to. No, he doesn't even want they should even suspect she's pregnant, because that undoes the whole story.
There's the extra week and 2 weeks, etc. where she's not a nida, but she's still off limits. Does she still have to wear the clothing in that period?
No, they don't have to wear anything. It was the custom to wear certain kinds of clothing. Yes. So it's possible that she could conceive during that period of time when she's still off limits with her husband? No, how could she conceive? How does she conceive? I understand. A woman, the semen is only viable for 3 days. After 3 days, it's over. So let's see, cohabited before she menstruated. One menstruates minimally 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. That's only 7 days. She's off limits on the Torah level. So the additional days, those are whatever it is, rabbinic or whatever. Okay, so there's no semen. So, okay, we have this, okay.
A woman moves to new neighborhood, and the rough neighborhood is different. So she says she's married to the mother of the father.
Okay.
And then she moves back to some other place, and she says, I'm not married to him.
Because I only said I was married because. Okay, it's plausible. That's plausible.
What happens to the presumption the next time that she says she's in need of
Okay, I just brought it up only. Okay, we'll discuss the Roim in 2 minutes. And Shkolim. Okay.
She's now not reliable.
No, it is.
Has she lost her history?
No. That first day it's l'chumra, it's not l'kula. If a woman goes, the Gemara says in Ksubis, a woman says to her husband, I'm permitted to you. She was a nida. And afterwards, the husband goes, she says, why? Because I went to the rabbi. The rabbi says, I'm okay. And he goes to the rabbi, and the rabbi says, never said it. She lied. It's grounds for divorce. He can't trust his wife. His wife said, I tithe the grain, or the rabbi tithed the grain on my behalf. Right? And then afterwards, he eats the food, and he checks with the rabbi. The rabbi says, I never tithed the grain. So it says, Ein Odom Dor in Nochash B'Fifachas. He can't live with a snake in the same basket. She can't be trusted. I mean, how do you live with this kind of woman? When you eat what you eat, you don't know if it's kosher. When you're with her, you don't know if she's permitted. So it's not a livable situation. It's a grounds for divorce. You divorce her. Without a ksuba. She loses the ksuba. Because he's not at fault. She's at fault. Okay. Rav Chisda says whether the father says she's married or she says she's married, if she commits adultery, one doesn't stone her. Now, it's interesting. We have a principle, Ein Hochem Mamen Acharov. The Gemara, it's a famous Gemara in Bava Basra. The Gemara says that an animal that's been established as a gora, you cannot plow with that kind of animal. All you can do with that animal is slaughter it and use it for its meat value. But for plowing, why? Because that animal that plows, it has to walk a straight line. If it's unruly, what happens? The blade will break in the ground. So it's not fit for plowing, only for what? For slaughtering. Man goes, he purchases an animal, and he doesn't say what he's buying it for. Is he buying it l'raja, which is plowing, or is he buying it l'bisra, for its meat? Okay? Pays the seller whatever the amount is, and afterwards he finds out the animal is unruly animal. So the buyer goes back to the seller and says, you know something, I never meant to buy this kind of animal, right? I want my money back. And the Gemara says, even though the majority of people buy oxen, it's for plowing, not for slaughtering. So it's Machlokes Rav and Shmuel. If you follow Rov says you should return the money, right? Because the majority of people purchase animals, they buy it for plowing, not for slaughtering. Shmuel says, Ein Holchem Mamen Acharov. One doesn't follow Rov to extract the money from the seller to return the money, and vice versa. If the buyer didn't pay it, right? Because it's a motzchav raya. It's the main thing is returning the money to the buyer. The buyer already paid, even though the majority of people buy it l'raja for plowing. The seller does not have to return the money to the buyer. That's Shmuel's position. Okay, so more discuss the price. It's unclear. It's unclear. Well, that's it. That's it. That's the reason. Because Rove is not strong enough to extract money from the Musik. Right? You have to evade him. You can't extract money based on Rove. Okay? So there's the discussion like this. The Gemara says there's a question like this. A very interesting question. The halacha is you have an obligation that if you have a flock or a herd of kosher animals, domesticated, there's a chiv ma'aser behema. You have to tithe the herd or the flock. You count 10, and you say the 10th is ma'aser. And when you say it's ma'aser, what does it assume? What's its status? It becomes a shlomim. It's equivalent of a shlomim. Ma'aser behema is kochim kalim. It's a shlomim. Now the Torah says you count. So there's a Mishnah. The Mishnah says, what happens? You count. You have 1,000 animals, which initially were not counted. You count 10, and of the ones that you count, let's say up to 10, one of them jumps back among the other animals. It's called kofetz echad min hamenuyin. Okay? Kofetz echad min hamenuyin. So the Mishnah says they're all exempt from ma'aser. They're all exempt from ma'aser. Why? Because the Torah says when you count, you have to count an animal that hasn't yet been counted. So since now every animal that you count among those animals, one of the animals that was counted jumped back among the other animals. So when you count, you're not sure the animal you're counting was an accounted animal or not a counted animal. So therefore, they're all exempt from Meiser. No matter how many. Even to 10,000. All animals, you don't tie these 10,000 animals, because every animal you count, it may have already been counted. You have to count to 10. But if the animal that you're counting may have been counted, you're not counting to 10, because you discount that one animal. So since it's something you can't resolve, they're Pturim and Meiser. They're all exempt from Meiser. Okay? So the famous Tosas above Mitzia. See, even today, Yiska Bocher in Yeshiva, he would be aware of this Tosas, because it's just within the first few baladim of Mitzia. So Tosa has a question, what about Bittul Barov? Right? It should be subsumed. The majority of the animals have not been counted. So why don't we go after Rov? And more than whole, Bittul Barov, let it be subsumed. So Tosa says it's a rabbinic law. It's a double choshu. It's Bali Chayim. The Gemara says, we discussed in the Chulin, Bali Chayim chashiv lo b'teli. Bal Chay has a certain innate value. Rabbinically, it's not subsumed. On a Torah level, would be. Rabbinically, it's not. Therefore, that's the reason why you don't tithe the herd or the flock. That's Tosa's answer. No, it's not Yechayev. Today, nobody takes Meiser. Of course, what are you going to do with it? You should do it, right? It's not rabbinic. What do you mean it's rabbinic? If you take the Meiser, it's not like not tithing grain or produce. You don't tithe grain and produce, it's tevel. You're not permitted to eat it. With a flock or herd, if you don't tithe it, you're permitted to use the animals. There's a mitzvah to tithe it, but since over here, so rabbinically, you don't do it. You don't tithe it. It's like blowing shofar Rosh Hashanah. That falls out on Shabbos, right? Even though you have an obligation, they tell you not, you don't. No, that's Tosis. It doesn't have to be Yisr. It means it has to be tension, meaning two entities which they cannot coexist. You understand? Doesn't. I hear. Good. Okay. It doesn't. Yeah. Okay. That's Tosa's question. Okay. Tosa's answers on a Torah level, it should be subsumed. Rabbinically, it's not subsumed. They have an innate, unique identity. Therefore, it's not subsumed. So there's a famous Rosh that's cited by the Shita B'Kubetzes. The Rosh says, the Torah says regarding Maisa Beima, it says, the Torah says, Asiri Vade v'lo Asiri Sofik. When you tithe something, it has to be definite, and it can be a Sofik. Even though we say Sofik, they write L'chumra, but it's still a Sofik. So it says, when you tithe something, it's Asiri Vade v'lo Asiri Sofik. So he says, although on a Torah level, you're permitted to go after Rov, but factually, in terms of factually, it's still a Sofik. Rov says you're permitted to eat it. Rov says it's subsumed, but factually, when you're counting that animal, it has to be factually an animal that hasn't been counted. Factually, you don't know. It may have been counted. Therefore, regarding Meiser, so Meiser trumps or doesn't deal with Rov is not sufficient for Meiser. That's the famous Rosh. Even after everything's said and done, the meat that you ate isn't kosher, it may not be kosher. So why was I permitted to eat it? Rov said I'm permitted to eat it. But in the reality, what I deal with it, it's a suffix. For mice, it has to be the reality, it has to be avad, it has to be definite, it hasn't been counted. So therefore, Rov cannot change that reality. That factually say it hasn't been counted. That's the Rosh's answer. Okay? So there's a question which is asked by the Minchas Chinuch. Minchas Chinuch asks a question. Now, the Gemara says in Chulin, how are you permitted to drink milk from an animal? Right? If an animal has any one of 18 defects, perforated stomach, a hole in its heart, whatever it is, the animal's a treifa. The milk of a treifa is not permitted, right? Even though the animal's a kosher species. So how are you permitted to drink milk? Maybe the animal, so the Gemara says, because rov behemoth ksheros. Because the majority of animals are not defective. Okay? Okay? That is the reason why you're permitted to drink the milk of an animal. Because rov rules, it's not a treifa. So the Minchas Chinuch asks, but if that is the case, we have a problem. How do you ever tithe an animal How do you take Meiser? You have the animals that you count to 10. Every one of the animals is a suffix. It may be a treifa, it not be a treifa. It's a suffix. Why are you permitted? Why do you say it's not? Rove. But if you tell me Rove doesn't establish fact, you should never have an obligation to take Meiser. Because you never know factually if the animal's not a treifa. The only reason why you know it's not a treifa, because Rove says it's not a treifa. But we just finished saying here in our situation that Rove is not sufficient to establish fact in the reality. So any animal, whether you're permitted to drink the milk, that's halacha. Is it kosher, not kosher? Rove says it's kosher. Do you know factually it's not a treifa? It's irrelevant. Rove is sufficient. But for Meiser, for the obligation of Meiser, factually it has to definitely be not a defective animal. So if that's the case, how do you ever have an obligation? How are you able to actually ever take Meiser? Every situation is always a suffix and maybe a treifa. That's the question of mitzvah chinuch. Okay? So it's good. But Rove is enough to put the man to death. But not for Meiser. The Rush says, when it says Asiri Vadiv Lo Asiri Sofek, means factually it has to definitely not be a treifa. No, but again. No, but again, but he's going on the pasuk. Asiri Vadai. When Torah says it has to be the 10th, that means it has to be, just as if it was counted, it doesn't qualify. If it's a treifa, it doesn't qualify. And Rove cannot be the basis to qualify it as an animal that meets the eligibility or the credibility of being tithed. That what? I'm not going with Tosfos, I'm going with the Rush. Going with the Rush. The Rush says it's a Torah law. It's not a rabbinic law. Tosfos says it's a rabbinic law. Torah law. The Minchas is asking on the Rush. Howard, you're missing the boat here.
You would say that every single animal is a suffix, then what do you do with the pasuk?
That's this question. That's his question. So you see from the pasuk, the Rush is not right. Factually, Torah says you have to take Meiser. So evidently, you see, Rove is sufficient to establish that it's not a treifa. It doesn't have to be in the fact. Even within a halach context, that's sufficient. That's the Minchas in this question. Okay? So the Minchas gives two answers. The Gemara says in Bechoros, and we had in Chulin also, there are two types of roves. There's a ruba the Isa Kamon, there's ruba the Lesser Kamon. Now, if you have a mixture, let's say you have 60 pieces of kosher meat, 1 piece of non-kosher meat falls in. Factually, the non-kosher meat is in that mixture. Okay? That's called ruba de isa kamon. I have a problem. Now the question is, when I take one of the pieces of meat out of the mixture, is that the problem or is it not the problem? Rove says you don't have to be concerned. Okay? Rove behemoth ksheris, the majority of animals are not defective. What I'm saying is the animal I have is not the defective animal. That's called ruba de lesser kamon. The problem doesn't exist before me. The other, I have the problem when I'm taking, am I taking from the non-kosher or the kosher? When the animal jumps into the herd, I have 100 animals, I have 1,000 animals. One of these animals is an animal that's been counted. Let's say an animal which is a treifa definitely would jump into the herd. Be the same thing. The animal I'm taking or I'm counting is the defective animal, is not the defective animal. Here I have an animal. Why should I even be concerned that this animal is a defective animal? That's called ruba de lesser kamon. Ruba de lesser kamon, even the Rush agrees. That Rove's probability says there's nothing to worry about. That's a probability issue. Here you have to subsume a reality of the problem. One is a halacha in subsuming, the other halacha is halacha in probability. I don't have to be concerned maybe it's defective, because the majority of animals are not defective. That's one answer we use.
How would that work for the patient?
1 second.
They might definitely have it.
1 second. The other answer he answers is this. Very interesting answer. We discussed the case of Neirechot comes and testifies a piece of meat is not kosher. Eirechot nem bisur, and you believe him. The court rules not kosher, so it's established. Let's say now somebody wants to eat that meat, and the person's forewarned, you should not eat the meat. Hasra, and he eats it. he gets malchus. So you say, so of course 2 witnesses had to warn him that he shouldn't eat the meat. And they testify he did eat the meat. But you say, but what's the basis for the meat not being kosher? Testimony of 1 witness. The answer is because since the 1 witness established it as not kosher, his testimony wasn't relating to the eating, therefore the man receives malchus. Over here, what happens? We have a question. This animal, am I permitted to eat its meat if I would slaughter it? Am I permitted to drink its milk? Right? That's a shaila. So Rove rules, you're permitted. Once Rove rules, that becomes fact. You understand? There is not a... It becomes an ordinary animal. That's called, it becomes ischazik, it becomes established. Once something is established to be a certain way, that becomes fact. It's not the Rove is ruling. I don't need Rove to rule any longer. Rove ruled, this animal's a kosher animal. I don't question any longer. It's no question. Here, it jumps into the herd. Now I have a question. The animal I'm taking, has it been counted, has it not been counted? An animal that's definitely defective jumps in. Now the animal I'm counting, it is the defective animal, it's not a defective animal. There's nothing, I'm dealing now with, I'm using the Rove to resolve this particular question. There I don't need Rove any longer. The animal already has been established as a kosher animal. I've been drinking its milk. If I wanted to slaughter, I already was ruled I could slaughter it to eat its meat. Therefore, once it's slaughtered, therefore the Rove is not saying anything any longer.
But you end up with a herd of 100 animals, which is definitely pada, right? In other words, you end up...
Correct?
Rove ends
So
up
every
every
animal is a kosher animal, factually kosher.
even though you do the one went back.
No,
You
no.
ended up
The
100.
moment it went back immediately, at that time, every animal is a question, factually a question.
Right, did you take them one by
No,
one?
but that, no.
And they're all...
That's after the question has arisen. The other case, the question never arose, right? Here, factually, I have a question. There, the question never, let's say I have 9 animals. I didn't even have 10 initially. When you have 9 animals, you don't have to take miser. Was I permitted to slaughter it at that moment? Definitely. Person asked the shell, could I slaughter? Yes. Could you drink its milk? Yes. Now I purchased a 10th animal. So now I have a chiv to take miser. Right? Every one of those animals already was ruled for whatever is you're permitted to drink its milk. I don't deal with Rove any longer. Rove already ruled fact.
You have a interesting contradiction because let's suppose I have an animal that is established as a prey, and it jumps into these animals that have not yet been tamed.
Correct?
So we've said all of them cannot be
Correct? Correct.
but you could eat from those animals. You could go one at a time and you could
No,
eat
but
them
again,
and
that's
go
exactly what he's asking. That's his question.
That could be not a
No,
problem.
that's not a problem. But there, the Rove is going to rule after I already have the question regarding miser. You understand? The animal jumped in now. So right now I have a new question. Maybe this animal is the animal that jumped in.
You don't have a problem with that.
No, so then I need Rove to rule on that. It's not going to help me.
It rules that.
It doesn't rule.
Eat it.
No, but simultaneously, I have the question about miser. They come about simultaneous. There was no simultaneous. You understand? No. At this moment, let's say before the animal jumps into the group, why was it permitted to eat it? Rove ruled it. You're permitted to eat it. Any one of these animals.
If they're all together.
Every animal. I have 1,000 animals. Why could I eat any one of the animals? Maybe they're treifa. Rove rules. They were all kosher. Now a treifa jumps in. I need Rove to rule again. I need Rove. It's a new ruling. Because maybe the animal I'm taking out of the group, maybe that defective animal that jumped in. Wait a second. But that Rove is ruling 2 things simultaneously. You could eat, but it hasn't established it yet. The principle is, since Rove already established it, so going forward, factually it's kosher. Here, simultaneously, Rove has to rule on 2 things. Kosher and miser. No, but again, it does make, but the question exists, could I tie these animals?
I'm not asking, I'm just asking can I eat?
Yes.
You can eat, but you cannot tie.
But again, because they're simultaneous. Those questions simultaneously are questions. It's not Rove ruled first, and then the new question arose afterwards.
When I get to animal 99, I've got one left.
You following what I'm saying? Animals, unrelated treifa. Can I eat the animal? Rove rules, you could eat the animals. Now I put together 10 animals. I have an obligation to tie them. The answer is yes, because Rove already ruled previously, before the question of Meiser, that they were kosher. Here, Rove already ruled they were kosher. Now all of a sudden, a definite defective animal jumps into the group. Right? At this moment, I have two questions. Which is the treifa regarding Meiser, and which animal's treifa regarding eating? Rove rules both of them simultaneously. But Rove is only effective in one, in regard to one, not in regard to the other. Because Meiser, you need factual, and for eating, you don't need factual. Halacha is sufficient that you should be able to eat. That's the distinction between two cases. No problem. You could eat all the animals. But correct. You could shecht and eat them.
Well, but when you shecht them, you find out if it's safe or not.
Let's say you don't find, for whatever reason.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe when you get
What's interesting about that is it appears as if there's a contradiction in Meiser, in Rove, in the principle.
Right.
But it's just because there's a Torah passage.
Right. Correct. It's an exception. Right. Correct. As you see, Tosas says it works. Tosas is only rabbinical. On a Torah level, it does. You would be obligated. If you would tithe it, it's a valid tithing on a Torah level.
you get to the 99th animal,
There aren't that many.
Let's continue. I don't want to get off the subject matter. Okay? No, this is not off. This has relevance to this.
maybe when you get to the 99th animal, there's no question. You've eaten all of the parshas. You've got one left.
Okay? You want to review chulin?
No, isn't that
Yeah. Okay. Vazer Rav Chisda l'tameg. Rav Chisda is consistent. Rav Chisda says that there's no liability whether the father said she was married or whether she's married. Rav Chisda is consistent with his position. Dom Rav Chisda, a man says, B'nize ben tesha shana v'yom echad. My son is 9 years old. He already began his 10th year. So we discussed yesterday. Halachah mishmi Sinai, a male child until he's 9 years old, if he engages with a woman before the age of 9, it's not considered an act of cohabitation. So let's say you have a married woman and she cohabits with an 8-year-old boy, and she's forewarned, don't cohabit with this boy. It's not considered an act of adultery, because is not considered an act of cohabitation. 9 years going forward, it's an act of cohabitation. The father says, my son is 9 years old. 9 years old. And now the woman engages with him sexually, and she's forewarned she can be put to death. The answer is no. Because what's the basis to put her to death? The father's testimony that he's 9 years old, not believed. To be considered, let's say he married her off, and he says, my daughter now is 3 years old, so now it's considered you're cohabiting with a married woman. But what's the basis to say she's 3? Because the father said so. Right? Neman l'korban. If it's a question of bringing a korban, that's kapara, that's erech and bisurin. Single witness is believed. Avlo l'malchus l'onchin. But to be subject to malchus means even malchus marus, even rabbinical malchus. Or onchin, a Torah, punishment not. Tanya, kavosi Rav Chisda. We have a bryce which supports this. Benize ben yud gimel shanav yom echad. A man says, my son is bar mitzvah. Biti zu bas yud bei shanav yom echad. My daughter's an adult, she's 12 years and a day. Nemon l'nedorim l'charomim l'akdeshus l'rochim avod l'makus l'onchin. Regarding whether the daughter's neder is a neder, or the act of consecration is consecration. Charomim, one's better kabayis, one is arochim, person's erki olai, the child would say, avod l'makus l'onchin. Again, of course, he's not believed. It's only to the extent it's an erech and bisurim. So for punishment, you need 2 witnesses. So now Tosas deals with the situation. How do you ever put anybody to death? What do you need for adulthood? You need puberty and you need years. Puberty alone is not sufficient. If a child reaches puberty before he's 13 years old, the child's a minor. Now the question is, how do you ever know that he's 13 years old? That's Tosas' question. Let's take a look at Tosas. Pirsh Bekuntris, bottom Tosis.
What's the question?
You'll hear Tosis. Pirsh Bekuntris, he cites the Mairi Shevi Beis Saros. The child brought 2 pubic hairs, which would be puberty. Avafilu Hochi Tzrichen on Leda Shnosov. But in addition to puberty, you have to know how old is the child. Shrei Shona below Saros, Ein Moilin, Ad Lamed Vav Shona. What about if you have years without puberty? A child never reaches, he has some kind of hormonal problem, never reaches puberty. He has to live the majority of it, he has to be 36 years old. That's adulthood. Dahainu Rov Shnosa v'simona below shonim, but if you have puberty without years, Dahainu lifnei yud gimel shumad ninu, it's considered like a mole. Has no value, those hairs. Aval pikein komer hoche gemard lamax onchin einu nemon. Pirish, yeah, makos mardus, rabbinic, heichod lo hisrubo lo onchin, hisrubo. The kosher, dim kein kol ha'noshim abos lefon einu lachlo, it's not a halacha is, a minor who gives chalitza is not a valid chalitza. Right? It's not valid. Because it's ish. It has to be an adult. So a minor, a person dies, he leaves over a younger brother. How do you know he's an adult? Well, you'll check he reached puberty. But how do you know he's 13 years old? Who's going to testify? People have to come and say, well, we remember when he was born, it's 13 years since then. Well, in every case, that's the case. That's how you establish a person as an adult. People remember his bris going back 13 years. Definitely not. And the woman, she has to be an adult too. She has to be 12 years old, because we equate the woman who receives chalitza to the yavam who gives chalitza. Maybe the surviving brother is a minor. If a person has an incestuous relationship who commits adultery, but we don't know the years. How old are they? Right? They may have puberty, but we don't know the years. Puberty without years mean nothing. Shemim ketanim. That's Tosa's question.
Maybe 20 years old, 25 years old, I think she's 3.
Not 3. She has to be 12. Right?
We have the concept of
We will continue. We'll see Tosa's.